writer. I know dialogue.
That's a fountain of conversation, man. That's a geyser.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yes, provocative.
Welcome to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. The website, bookedonrock.com. I'm Eric Senich. Hope you're having a great holiday season. It's another edition of The Dialogue, a chill and chat with authors, fellow podcasters, listeners, and more. This episode's guests are Mark Camire and Corey Morissette, hosts of And the Podcast Will Rock, a podcast devoted to Van Halen. Each week, Mark and Corey spin the wheel of rock to find out which Van Halen song they will break down. A lot of fun talking with these guys. I put up a Van Halen playlist. It is in the show notes page, so check that out. Let's get to it. Here are Corey Morissette and Mark Camire. Corey and Mark, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you guys again.
Yes, it hasn't been that long. You were just on an epic live show with us just a few days ago that I'm still recovering from, to be honest.
Yeah, same here. And Mark, you tapped out at like
I did
12, what was it, 12:30? Or I can't recall what time it was. This is, by the way, on your podcast, and the podcast will rock on YouTube. It was live on YouTube.
Live on YouTube, so live show means anything goes, including being handed off screen continuous drinks, very strong ones that really built up. And by the time we finished that second half of the show, it was Mark had to go to sleep. You know,
like Drago and Rocky IV, just that was it. You hung in there as long as you could, but you were done.
I wanted very much to power through it, but I know myself, and I know how I was feeling and how I was saying words at that time. Like, if we go forward anymore, it's going to be just an incoherent mess, and that wouldn't be good for anybody.
I tell you, if Mark is Drago, that means I was Rocky in the opposite corner, punch drunk, but still going, right?
You were. You hung in there right until the bitter end.
Yeah.
Bitter end. So you guys are now coming up on, 60 episodes, right?
That's right, yeah.
And the podcast, it launched November of 2021. How did you guys meet and eventually come up with this idea for the podcast?
We were in the same circles on social media. Firstly, it had to do with this online movie trivia league where, a bunch of us just got together, did trivia matches against one another. Corey was an editor for that channel until they finally just ran him ragged, and he said, I've had enough. So he was out, and not long after that, I was out, just because whatever. But through that and through a few other connections we made through this particular thing, we all decided to get together and sort of podcast together, just this small group of us. So that's really where I got to know Corey more, was through that little gone but not forgotten podcasting network with our friends. And then one day Corey just decided, you know what, I really want to do a Van Halen podcast. I think that would be really fun. And he asked me if I would want to do that with him. And I said, of course, because why wouldn't I want to talk about Van Halen? We figured out the format, and which, we took a lot of liberties with the Pot of Thunder dudes. So shout out to Pot of Thunder. But we've been going strong ever since. We didn't know if we were going to have the energy or the interest to keep it going as long as we did. But by God, every time we did a particular episode, it just became more and more fun for me, for sure. And it must be working for Corey, because he has yet to say, you know what, I've got too many podcasts going, so I'm gonna 86 this one.
Corey, you're a busy man.
Yeah,
I mean, you got a family, you got a job too, so you got like 10 podcasts going at the same time. How do you do it?
I honestly don't know. And this last week, I recorded 7 or 8. All together, with having a young family and work and all that. So I keep getting suckered into it. And every time I mention, or every time we get a guest on the show, usually suggested by Eric Senich, hey, you should get this guy on the show. And then after talking with them, like I was talking with the Bogus Otis boys, and we're just talking about a shared love of ZZ Top. I'm like, you know what? There isn't really a great informative ZZ Top podcast out there. Oh, we should start one. I'm like, fuck, I can't get into another podcast, but if they want to start one, I am all for it.
But seriously, you got an Aerosmith one, you got the Van Halen one, obviously, and the podcast will rock. And how many other? There's a couple more, aren't there?
There's one more. Yeah. Backtracks theme music. Yeah. We're talking everything music and movies. So guests come on, they talk about a certain track from a movie they love. We just recorded one actually with Mark Camire. He picked Who Wants to Live Forever by Queen from the Highlander soundtrack.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's
that was a lot of fun.
So this idea of spinning the wheel, picking a random song, whatever comes up on the wheel, is that from Pot of Thunder? Where did that come from?
Pot of Thunder originally started as an all Kiss podcast. And they had different MacGuffins through the years of how they picked their song. Like right now, it's the Bozo Pewter from the old Bozo the Clown show. They used the George Michael Sports Machine, if you remember that from the Midwest. That used to be a thing. And they would just pick a random Kiss song every single week. It was actually on one of their shows. They were taking viewer or listener questions. And one of the questions was, if you could do another band in this format, what band would you do? And they said, we'd never do that with another band. It's way too much work. But they started naming off bands, and I think it was Chris L who said, geez, Van Halen would be a really good one. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Damn right, Van Halen would be a really good one, because you have, 3 different eras of the band. You've got some great stuff on there, but you got some, not so great stuff on there too that would kind of make it interesting. Like, you don't want to pick a band like AC/DC because you'd say, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good for 500 episodes, because they're all, they're all pretty good. Whereas Van Halen, it's such an eclectic, wide range catalog of music, just seemed like a natural fit.
Yes, eclectic is a nice way of putting that. Things can get pretty ugly. You got the Sammy fans, the Dave fans.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't we know it?
Did you expect the criticisms that you received along the way? Did you know it was going to get pretty ugly?
I personally didn't think it was going to get that ugly. I knew the moment we hit the airwaves, we'd be criticized no matter what we said, because that's just the world we live in. And Van Halen is a band that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and rightfully so, because they're great, they're wonderful, and they've been around for so long. I guess what I just never really took into account, and I should have, so shame on me, I'm saying it, shame on me for not realizing that the camps of Sammy fans and David Lee Roth fans would be just so heated and divided. And I made the mistake of saying that I was more pro Sammy of anything, just on a vocal technical standpoint.
That's where you heard the ding ding
Eric,
ding.
That was the absolute wrong thing to say. And so that one of many wrong things that I've said on the show as again criticisms. We never fall short of being reminded about what we've messed up on. But yeah, no, man, I personally didn't think it was that bad until we started really getting into it and go, okay, that's what's going to happen.
It just shows you how passionate the fans are. Yes, there is a great big chasm between Dave fans and Sammy. There's not like there are fans like myself who love both eras. They're out there for sure.
We love them, but I just made the mistake of saying, if I had to say vocally, I'm more of a Sammy guy, but that doesn't mean, and I couldn't even get that second half out where I said, but I ultimately loved the band as a whole, whatever era. It didn't matter. Once I put in my I'm pro Sammy little comment in there, then it's just like, now all of a sudden I'm the Sammy guy, only the Sammy guy.
The narrative was set from that point on. Yeah, you couldn't put the horse back in the barn. But
I should have known.
Is it true? Did I hear that you're going to have the DLR cast boys on along with the Bogus Otis guys on together?
Yes, we're planning our third live show in
the
January.
Bogus Otis podcast, by the way, is an all Sammy Hagar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Ooh, boy.
Yeah. So
actually, Eric, while we got you on here, do you want to come on and help us referee that show?
Great. Oh, that would be so cool. That would be so fun.
Yeah,
that was
so. If we didn't know how heated it was before, we're about to find out.
Oh, I can't wait, because we're guaranteeing 2 wheel spins, 1 Sammy track, 1 Dave track. So if we spin 2 Sammys, we'll respin until we get a Dave. So we cover 1 from each.
By the way, Darren Paltrowitz from the DLR cast, he is a fan of the show, and he was on. He wanted me to pass along a message. He said, can you ask the guys why you haven't talked about any songs from Sonrisa Salvaje, which is David Lee Roth's Spanish version of Eat 'Em and Smile? And I tried to explain to him, it's Van Halen only, it's not Dave solo, but he's a little obsessed with that album.
He is. He brought that up quite a bit, both on and off the air while he was on with us. But Mark and I have had the discussions. If we don't get lynched or run off of podcast feeds by then, maybe when we finish the Van Halen catalog and 60 some songs that we have left, maybe we'll do the solo stuff. I'd love to talk about all sorts of Dave solo stuff and Sammy solo stuff, and even get into Mammoth, because that's probably my favorite music out there right now.
Absolutely, Mammoth WVH, and you've had quite a few guests on, including Greg Renoff, who wrote the 2015 book Van Halen Rising. Corey, you said you've read the book. You also read 2017's Run-In with the Devil by the longtime manager of the band, Noel Monk, along with David Lee Roth's book from 97, Crazy from the Heat, and Sammy Hagar's Red from 2011. Mark, have you had a chance to read any of those books?
Unfortunately, I have not. I have this list of books that I absolutely need to get to, and the ever growing list just keeps going, especially with these since we've been doing the show. It's been made very clear to me I should probably get more into the mindset by reading these books, because as the audience loves to remind me sometimes, these guys are not experts. Why am I listening to the show full of non-Van Halen experts? So that's why there's always the caveat in the show. We're not experts. We're just fans, just talking about it. But I feel like if I start reading these books, maybe I'll have a little bit more merit to some of my commentary.
Well,
so I haven't read them yet, but they are definitely on the list.
Start with Greg's book, because that just that starts literally with the beginning of the band. The story of Ice Cream Man, the origins of Ice Cream Man. And Corey, you probably remember this story. This is such a great story. This goes back to pre-Van Halen days. As the summer ended, this is from Greg's book, by the way, Van Halen Rising. As the summer ended, Roth maximized the band's backyard party opportunities. Roth's friend Bobby Hatch hired Red Ball Jet, which was Dave's old band, to play at his parents' home, which was situated right down Michigan Ave from Roth's close friend Stanley Swantek's house. Hatch remembers, quote, "I met Dave Roth through Stanley. He fit in with us because we had a boys' club. We had 13 or 14 growing up on our own block. We used to hang out in front of my parents' house. We used to call it the Wall. Basically, if you didn't have a date that night, you'd hang out at the Wall and upset the neighbors with loud music, just having fun. During these days, one key component of the Michigan Avenue party scene was an ice cream truck. As Roth often told audiences on Van Halen's 2007 tour, quote, we'd park the ice cream truck in the backyard and take all the ice cream out and put beer in it for the party." I love that. Although Roth recalled Stanley Swantek having driven it, Stanley's brother David sets the record straight. And he says, quote, "This guy named Tommy Lake bought an ice cream truck and did it as a business, at least for one full summer. We used to party at our house and the Hatch's house, which is right down the street. Tommy used to bring his ice cream truck over there, and sometimes we'd go and sell ice cream with him and drink beer because we had beer in the ice chest. During one of these boozy summer rides around the city, Lake told the Swantek brothers about an old John Brim record he had with a song called Ice Cream Man. David Swantek says that his brother then borrowed the record and played it for Dave. And that's where the song came from. With both the ice cream truck and Red Ball Jet situated at Hatches, the party got underway and soon got out of control." And then they start talking about how things, the police show up and all that. But that's such a cool story, the origins of Ice Cream Man. That's how it all starts.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. There's so many of those stories in Greg Renoff's book that, those backyard party days were wild.
Insane.
Way back in the day. So just for that alone, Mark, if you just want some interesting backyard party stories, pick up Greg's book. But not only is it the first one you start off with, it's by far, I think, the most well-written, because Greg really just knocked it out of the park. And when we get to the section of the show where we're talking about books we want to see, it's going to involve a lot of Van Halen and a lot of Greg Renoff continuing the story. But that is such a great story about how Ice Cream Man came out. And didn't Dave, he played a bunch of different acoustics on stage with that, right? For the intro? Yeah,
You
like
talk
he pulled
about,
like a
in the
steel
backyard
string
party?
acoustic.
Yes, he would do that. And then he had the Dave-sicle.
Yeah, the Dave-sicle. Yeah, they looked like a giant ice cream bar. Yeah,
the
Dave-sicle.
Dave-sicle.
Of course he did.
Yeah, man. Yeah, those backyard parties were just crazy. And like Dave said in his book, they took those seriously. They were mini concerts. And that's why they developed such a following, which led to them getting those gigs at the clubs on the Sunset Strip. And ultimately, Ted Templeman sees them. And off we go, man. I had asked you guys over the weekend on your show about Wolfgang's recent comments. He was talking about how he's bummed out by the online trolls. And I was asking you guys whether or not he should just hire somebody or a team of people to handle his social media so he doesn't have to deal with it. But here's a reminder of just how stupid critics can be. And I hope that Wolfgang remembers what his dad went through when Van Halen came up. Greg Renoff in this book includes quotes of reviews from critics when the band was opening for Black Sabbath in '78. And in the July '78 issue of Cream magazine, here's what was written about Van Halen. Rob Patterson of Cream mocked Van Halen as the offspring of heavy metal dinosaurs like Deep Purple and Sabbath. He writes, quote, "Face the facts, kiddos. When it comes to heavy rock and roll, you know, the kind of stuff that sounds like a herd of dinosaurs engaging in some prehistoric S&M. A little bit of calculated outrageousness goes a long way. So along come Van Halen, led by two Dutch siblings on guitar and drums who grew up in Pasadena, and fronted by one David Roth, whose struts and screeches emit a crotch-splitting intensity, the likes of which haven't been seen since Jim Dandy Mangrum invented his now passé cockwalk."
Jeez.
I mean, what he's saying is that they're just basically a ripoff of Deep Purple and Sabbath.
Right. Which on that tour, they were blowing Sabbath off the stage, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What do you think? Should Wolfie hire somebody to just do social media for him?
I'm of the opinion, yes. If he really just does not want to deal with it anymore and just kind of wants to be like, let him do his thing and leave it alone, he'd probably be more beneficial if he just doesn't want to just ex-nay the social media in general. Then yeah, get somebody else to run it, or just maybe there's got to be options where you can just not see anything. You can just not see people's reactions or their commentary or what have you. I know you can turn off messages and things like that. So maybe if he just takes it off of his phone or something like that, so where he just like can't see it, and then have somebody else post this picture on my Twitter so I don't have to do it. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, otherwise just don't bother.
But as a musician, because you are a musician, does that affect your creativity? Does that start to get into your head?
I guess it would depend on the circumstances. For me personally, I might be a little bit in my head, but I also am a big fan of spite, and spite is my best flavor. It's my most favorite flavor ever. So a lot of times, if I see a lot of harsh criticisms online, part of me wants to go, "Why do I even bother with this? Let me just take this off. Let me just turn it off and not bother." But then the spite comes in and goes, "No, instead, I'm gonna double down on what I'm doing, and I'm gonna do it even harder just to make everyone, all the haters mad."
Defiance.
Defiance. So part of me actually, let me amend my statement. I think maybe Wolfie should do that. He should just like go full on, just reattack and like re-troll until eventually they just stop, because it's not just trolling him's not going to work.
He's given it back to him. And he said, he was adamant, "It doesn't bother me," when people would say, "Don't let these people bother you." And he's like, "You don't get it. It's not bothering me." But then he did say it does bother him. So, I mean, he is human. I mean, there's no way to. But the thing is, with that generation, I don't know if it's possible to even stay away from social media. It's just a part
especially as a young musician trying to establish your career too. Social media can be a powerful tool.
That's why I think maybe it's more prudent, if it really does bother him that much, then hire somebody else to do it for you, because you're right. So having a social media presence, especially in this day and age as a musician, is kind of key. And
right.
I wish it weren't that way, or I wish it were the way I feel like it used to be, because I feel like social media has done a lot for would-be artists that probably would have gotten none of their voices heard before. Social media has provided an outlet in order to get word of mouth, in order to get your stuff shared so that people can hear it, they can see it, whatever it is, and then maybe you can have like a steady career through that. I feel like there's a lot of good that could have been done with social media, but of course we have just completely fucked that into the ground. But still, it's important, I guess, for a musician to stay active on social media in order to, maybe you don't have to engage the fans directly all the time, but you got to keep them in the know. And as you say, because of this generation, I mean, everybody relies on social media for everything news related.
There's an old school manager who's still in the business, and he has new bands. And he was on a podcast once talking about, he tells his bands, "Look, guys, you have to post every day." And then they'd be like, "Well, what am I going to post every day?" It doesn't matter. Just post something. You have to post every day and be out there constantly. That's just
a lot of
insane
work.
to me to have to do that every day.
Yeah, it's very true. And Wolfie's handling it all really well so far. Like he's dealing with the trolls and he's engaging with fans, and that's the positive part of social media, in that he can engage with fans and build his fan base. And his first album was great. That certainly helped. He did some great tours supporting a bunch of acts. Then, of course, there was the big Taylor Hawkins tributes that he just knocked out of the park, right?
Yeah.
Now there's all this buzz around his second album, which will hopefully coming out early next year.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. Corey, one of the books you want to see written is a Michael Anthony memoir, which is exactly what the guys from the DLR cast said when they were on recently. Yes. Fans often wonder what went through Mike's mind throughout the early years, the Sammy years, the post-Van Halen years when he was out of the band. And one story that stands out from Noel Monk's book is regarding Mike's portion of the profits from the 1984 album. So I wanted to read this excerpt for you guys and get your thoughts on it. An interesting quote from Noel in this chapter. He writes, quote, "The whining was driving me crazy. Edward whining about David, David whining about Edward and Alex, Alex whining about Michael of all people. Michael, well, he didn't whine about anything or anyone. To the end, he remained grateful for the gift that was Van Halen." I mean, that, and Noel told it like it was. He's sadly since passed. Mm-hmm. But if there was anything bad to say about Mike, Noel would have had said it in the book. He just laid it all out there. Nothing.
Yep.
He must have had those. Well, actually, he did have a moment where it's in the book.
He's probably just extremely patient. He seems like a very patient individual because I feel like you'd have to be in order to deal with all three of those personalities at a given moment. And in that includes interchange Dave with Sammy. Not to say that one is more dramatic than the other, but I mean those are three strong personalities based on everything that we've heard, the things we've read, and all the stories that come out. Michael seems to be very patient, and I don't know, maybe he might be one of those dudes that just he just doesn't talk shit about people. He just doesn't do it.
You want to talk about being pushed to the limit? This is an example. This is on the 1984 tour. So again, this is from Running with the Devil from Noel Monk. It says, "We were gathered in a hospitality suite, loading plates with food from a buffet table while David did his usual critique. I had learned to tune him out by this point, and in fact, often just left the room altogether. But on this night, I was there for every word of David's post-mortem and for Edward's sudden and unexpected interjection. When he began to speak, I thought for sure that he would lash out at David, but he didn't. Instead, he began taking shots at Michael, and not just about his performance on stage, but about his role in the band. Michael doesn't contribute as much as the rest of us," Edward observed. "Michael doesn't write music or lyrics. He might as well have said that Michael was just taking up space and that his role could be fulfilled by virtually anyone. Now, this may or may not have been a valid point. Michael was not a songwriter and thus contributed little to Van Halen from a composing standpoint. But the same could be said of Alex. Edward and David had always done most of the writing, and everyone was fine with the arrangement. Songwriting credits notwithstanding, royalties were split equally among the band members. For some reason, Edward now felt compelled to challenge that arrangement. Quote, 'Why does Michael get the same share as the rest of us?' Edward asked. And as he said this, he looked at me, like I had anything to do with an arrangement that predated my arrival and that supposedly was based on friendship and egalitarianism. I had no answer for this. Frankly, I had no idea what was going on or why suddenly everyone seemed to be ganging up on the one member of the band who meant no ill will toward anyone. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So then Al jumps in behind Edward, asking the same sort of questions and offering similar observations about Michael's value or lack thereof to the band. For the most part, Michael just sat there quietly and took it until David stood up from his seat, a plate of food in hand, and walked around the table. He stopped when he reached Michael's seat and stood over him for a moment, glaring menacingly, but saying nothing. The entire scene reminded me of a junior high school cafeteria with the cool kids picking on the shy and sensitive. My hope was that Michael would stand up for himself, but he didn't. He just sat there with David standing over him until finally David exploded in a manner that was extreme even by his lofty standards. Without saying a word, David slammed his full plate of food down on top of Michael's full plate. The effect was startling. Food went flying everywhere, glasses tipped over and shattered, silverware fell to the floor, and all conversation stopped. We all stared at Michael and awaited his reaction. This is it, I thought. Here's the moment the quiet kid fights back. But he didn't. Instead, he simply pushed his chair back from the table and stood up. He lightly brushed at some of the food stains on his shirt, gave David a hard stare, and walked out of the room.
It
if there was
strikes me
ever
that
a moment,
yeah.
that would have been it.
You know what? I think we need a Michael Anthony memoir, because you're right. We talk about it on the show all the time about I wonder what the headspace is when they were doing this, or when this happened, or what have you. We talk about that all the time. We can have some answers based on the literature provided from certain perspectives and certain people, but we don't have Michael's. That is one I would absolutely, because I wonder if he thinks about this moment. I wonder if this is something that, even though he's just sort of brushed it off and moved on, didn't do anything, I wonder if it's still something that lingers at him. Or is Michael the kind of guy that knows very much that if you press his button so hard and he ignites, that it just doesn't stop? Is he one of those guys? And that he knows that he can't be that guy, so he just purposely says nothing, does nothing, kind of looks like he's taking it, when inside, maybe in his brain, he's just counting down from 100 or something like that.
But what do you make of Dave? Like, is Dave just pissed at Michael for, is he basically saying, dude, do something, say something to these motherfuckers?
It's kind of the impression you get. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Why are you not saying
on that? Yeah, based on that, it sounds like Dave was just simply trying to elicit a reaction, any reaction, just anything whatsoever, of like, are you going to just sit there and take it, or am I just going to throw my food at you to make you? I don't know. It almost sounds like he's intentionally provoking Michael just to see if he's going to do anything whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Sure.
Yeah. The comparison in the book reminded me of like junior high at the cafeteria or something. Like, yeah, that's exactly what that sounds like. And it sounds like Michael is not the shy kid getting picked on. He's more so the kid getting picked on, but knows very much that if he reacts, he is going to be the one that gets in trouble. So he chooses not to.
Right. To add insult to injury, I guess is the phrase. Next day, 2 weeks later, Alex, Edward, and David all came to Noel Monk's room without Michael. And he says, "What's up, guys?" And Alex is the first to speak. "We have a problem with Michael." He says, "We want to cut Michael out of the royalties." And Noel's like, "Oh, you mean in the future? Like from here on out?" I said, "No, not just moving forward, but for 1984 as well." So that was after the album had come out. Noel says they wanted to backdate it to a point prior to the release of 1984. And Dave says to Noel, "Fix it, Noel. Call the lawyer, have him draw something up, and we'll get Michael to sign it." Jesus Christ.
Through that all, Mike's never really said anything about that time in the band. The only time I remember him saying anything I really heard him was when Eddie and then went back and kind of airbrushed him out of the old album art and stuff. Yeah. When Wolfie had joined, he said that was the one that really kind of stung. And I'm like, after all the shit you've taken in the last like 20, 30 years, and that was the final
That's
straw.
The moment, yeah.
And Wolfgang, by the way, said that wasn't the band who did that was whoever ran the website, and that they got pissed and called or emailed whoever ran the website, like, pull it down now.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, but that's what Wolfgang said. But yeah, I mean, you have to understand too, Michael Anthony is probably thinking, if I say something, I'm fired.
Yeah. If I say something, I'm fired. If I do anything, I'm fired. As much as he probably fantasized often about just decking them all out simultaneously, like all three of them. He knew, he's like, I'm going to get fired if I do that. And then what's next? Because, I understand that mindset, but then again, it's Michael Anthony. I mean, he's not the most superb bass player in the world, but he's efficient and he's great on the background vocals. He knows how to do the job. He can do the job and not complain about it.
And by the way, like, he's loyal to the band.
Correct. So I mean, it's not like
got to
he
get a
didn't
little
have,
something extra for that.
No kidding.
especially at that time period. I can't imagine he would have had a difficult time finding a new gig, but maybe he just didn't want to risk it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a bummer to read that. Bummer to read, but
It is a bummer.
Corey Morissette and Mark Camire from And the Podcast Will Rock are here. Podcastwillrock.com, the website. You can hear the show wherever you get your favorite podcasts. So let's finish out with two books by Dave and Sammy. Dave's book is a wild read. It's very Dave. It's written in his voice. And one thing that you guys touch on often on your show is just how good Alex Van Halen is on drums. So I found a cool excerpt from Dave's book. So I'm going to read that. But that's something that, Mark, you had said you didn't really think about that until doing the show. And
Right.
really listening to the songs, what Alex is doing.
Yeah, I like to think I have a keen ear for good drumming. And I've had to build that up over the years because I actually have a lot of really good friends that are drummers. I am not a drummer myself. I wish I could. But Alex Van Halen was never kind of in the upper echelon of drummers that my peers and other musicians would talk about. So, and I always just, again, from not really listening to what he's doing, just kind of on the surface listening, I was never overly impressed. So I just kind of, unfortunately, wrote Alex off for the longest time of going like, yeah, Van Halen's great. I love Van Halen. Like Alex is whatever. And just kind of like, that was that. But it wasn't until doing the show and really listening, and most of that credit is pointed at Corey, because Corey kind of challenged me like, no, really listen to what he's doing and like describing some of the things. And then that sort of opened my eyes. And then, other subsequent talks I've had with musicians going, anyone who thinks Alex is a mediocre drummer does not understand what he's doing whatsoever. And I mean, it's every episode we do more and more, I have to like really tune into Alex just to hear what he's doing. And more often than not, that's completely right. There's so much he's doing that you don't realize it because you're just listening on the surface. You dare to go a little bit deeper and realize Alex is a machine. And
yeah, I'm thinking maybe it's because you play all of the music from Van Halen, the whole catalog. I mean, you can hear it on the hits, but some of the deep tracks, you're hearing it.
You talk about, just real quick, rock critics and why you should really kind of temper what you read from rock critics. I was doing a lot of reading about Van Halen before we started the show, and rock critics are like, oh, they have a mediocre rhythm section. Like, oh, Mike's okay. Alex is average to below average. And so that was kind of the attitude I took into the show. And then you start listening to music, you're like, I think I was right originally when I thought this guy is one of the greatest rock drummers of all time. I'm not going to listen to rock critics anymore. I'm listening to my ears, and this guy's killing it.
Well, yeah, Eddie had a great quote once. He said, if it sounds good, it is good. It was something along those lines.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. But here, this is from Dave's book. This is so that he was talking about back when he met Ed and Al. I said, Ed Van Halen and I took vocalization class, learning to sing, learning how to use vibrato. For our final exam, it was a 1-semester course. This is, I believe, Pasadena City College. For our final exam, it was a 1-semester course. You had to do a song, and Edward played acoustic guitar and did the Blind Faith tune, Can't Find My Way Home. He played the guitar exactly like it was on the record. It was very impressive. I sang Go Away Little Girl, the Donny Osmond version.
Of course.
Dave. But now here's the Alex part. Alex Van Halen was knocking out 18-piece rock jazz ensemble arrangements for West Side Story that nobody could play in 11/14 time, 11 beats per minute, and had to go from instrument to instrument, showing these befuddled students how to get to the first coda.
Good God.
There you go. There's another one. Oh, the backyard. Dave talks about how they perceive their backyard parties as little concerts, like I was mentioning. Yeah. And we know how that paid off for them. Mm-hmm. Their work ethic was off the charts from day one. And there's one excerpt from Dave's book I want to read, shows just how serious Dave was. And it's called Rothing Your Room. Do you remember this, Corey?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So Rothing Your Room, Mark. This is great.
Please enlighten me. I want to know what Rothing is.
Despite all the festivities, there were a lot of times you had to bow out and sleep, try and catch up. The work and discipline ethic that surrounded Van Halen was severe. You had 4 Captain Ahabs. Well, surely when the boat puts to port, it's going to be wild, because when we were sailing and working, it was severe. Okay, so that's in Dave's voice. So sometimes you have to read these back again.
Oh yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let's read that again. And I followed a few philosophies and codes throughout, starting with our first top bill shows in 79 and continuing up to now. This book was written in 97. What I do is the night before the first performance, I'll show up extra late when everybody's gone after rehearsal. Nobody there but a couple of crew and some night watchmen. I get a big bath towel and I get on my hands and knees and I wash every square centimeter of that stage. Sometimes it takes me quite a while, but it reevaluates for me that if I'm willing to do that, if you're willing to get on your hands and knees like a washwoman and scrub every centimeter of that deck, then there's nothing else left to do. There's no further commitment that you can make, and I still do it. There's your contrast to those rest and relaxation stories that continue to this day. It's always been a contrast with me.
Interesting.
Dave, that's the martial arts type of thing I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's the
Probably.
mindset.
I wonder if he was doing that for his final shows in Vegas there, or on the Kiss tour even.
Was he Rothing the room?
Yeah.
Look at the picture on the front with him in the.
I know, right?
I mean, of course.
Taken from the 85 Crazy from the Heat album. Looks like the album cover sessions, the photo sessions.
Was probably going to be the movie poster too, back when it was going to be a film as well. Yeah.
Well, basically, what the film would have been, basically the videos, California Girls and Just a Gigolo, what you're seeing there is what the movie would have been. Kind of out there. All these crazy characters.
I'm trying to picture in my brain the world that we would have had if that thing had come to fruition and that film would have been in our ether. I mean, it's just like
the script is out there. I'll send it to you guys.
Oh
I'm gonna have to read this. I'm gonna have to read it.
You're like, wow, this is Dave. He says the reason he went so far astray with those songs is he wanted to make it clear, I'm not leaving Van Halen. This is just, so don't confuse this with Van Halen. That's what he said. But Ed and Al were like, he played those songs for him on the flight back from the last show on the 84 tour. And he's like, guys, you got to hear this. And then he wants them to make the music for the movie. And they're looking at him like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
You want us to be your backing band for your movie? Like, he thought they were going to be excited about it. And they were listening to it like jaws dropped.
I get it. It's almost like because as you say, he was David Lee Roth of that era, and I mean untouchable, just on top of the world. And he's showing the boys this other music that he's been doing, and he's like, "Oh, listen to this," and I'm so excited. Yeah, I mean, there's a territorial sort of thing.
He did not.
No, of course,
according
of course
to
he
Noel
didn't.
Monk, he just thought.
Yeah, hubris is a powerful thing, and it just we're talking about David Lee Roth.
We're going to take from this episode.
That's right.
I mean, you can absolutely quote me on that. But it's
true.
And it's Diamond Dave, so it's that's not. Of course they thought that's what he was doing, and of course he thought, or he just didn't think that. They're mad. Why would they be mad? Or why would they be upset about this? Thought they'd be happy for me. Like, no, because from their perspective, you are showing them that you don't need them. You're showing them that you have this whole other project that you're more stoked. It seems like more stoked about with that than you've been with us ever. And then you are expecting us to be kind of your backup dudes. The band's called Van Halen. And again, hubris is a powerful thing for both sides, and the band is called Van Halen. You can't. It's not. I don't think it's that a far stretch to say that Eddie and Alex probably felt like they were being challenged,
or was it a passive aggressive move on Dave's part?
It could have been. It could have been even if Dave didn't realize it, because that happens more often than you think with people. But so I can understand why they would feel the way they felt, but I would also understand Dave saying like, well, no, I'm really excited about these other songs that I've been doing. They're not Van Halen related, but that's okay, because I can have my cake and eat it too, or my ice cream, whatever he prefers.
Yeah. What's funny though is Michael Anthony. We talk about he bites the lip. Mm-hmm. He said he laughed. Michael Anthony's like, when I heard Just a Gigolo, he's like, I laughed.
But it's hard not to.
Yeah,
It's really hard not to. It's like what else is he supposed to do? It's like I laughed. Yeah, like whatever.
Yeah.
Imagine
that's
if he
what I
would have
wanna
led off
read.
with Just a Gigolo. Like the first single off that EP was California Girls. Had he led out with Just a Gigolo, and you just all of a sudden you hear that do 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 do. Like what the Sammy bloody fuck is this?
That's the chapter of the memoir I want to read the most.
Right,
Is just
right.
like Dave walks in with his solo shit, and we all take a listen. It's
Yeah.
like, here's what's going on through my head. First of all,
Oh,
I
my
laughed.
God. The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. One thing that I say Dave and Sammy have in common is the will over skill attitude in whatever skills they have, and they each have some serious skills, whether it be vocals or stage performance, whatever. But they always came off to me as the type of guys who, because of any flaws they may have, they're going to work twice as hard because of it. And whatever strengths they have, they're not going to rely on it. And Sammy, from the time he leaves Montrose and starts his solo career, is just all out, record, tour, do whatever it takes, hit every city, no matter how big or small. Here's an excerpt from his book, which goes back to when he was fired from Montrose. Did you guys know he was fired?
No.
Okay, because, Ronnie Montrose was jealous, I guess. Ronnie Montrose was a complicated dude. Great guitarist, but he wanted to be in charge.
It wasn't Ronnie Montrose kind of the middle act on that Black Sabbath Montrose Van Halen bill?
Yes, but that wasn't when Sammy was in the band, though.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, right. So, here's this is from Sammy's book, Red, My Uncensored Life in Rock. I was on my last nickel. I went over and stood in line and started collecting unemployment again. I was considering going back on welfare too, because I had a baby. My house rent in Mill Valley was more than $200 a month, which in those days was a lot of money, way more than I was able to make in a month. I was fucking down and out, brother. Is this Hulk Hogan's book? Oh, sorry.
That's what I was supposed to say.
Brother. People in San Francisco thought I was a big star. They figured these guys headline Winterland. I would have thought we'd made it too, but I didn't have any money. I took an old mattress that I picked up off the side of the road, put it up against the wall in my basement for soundproofing. I started writing, went down there with a guitar and an amp and a little cassette recorder, and I just fucking recorded. I wrote and wrote and wrote. Goes on to say, all I knew how to do in those days was what I'd done with Montrose. That was the start of my solo years. I just knew how to be Montrose without Ronnie. I was playing guitar and singing. I was really driven to write my own songs and go out on tour until I made it. And he did. He worked his ass off. And those early albums are really not that good. I mean, he was just kind of finding his way. There's actually, when he signed to Capitol, it's in this book, Corey. You may remember this too. Do you remember when he talked about the Seeger song that was offered to Sammy?
Just vaguely. It's been a long time since I've read it too.
I'm trying to remember which song. It was Night Moves.
Oh, yeah.
Night Moves was
big song.
Let me just make sure.
He offered that to Sammy?
Yeah, and I think here it is.
Wow.
He passed on recording it. Seeger wrote it, but they were both on the same label. So they're both on Capitol. And he was offered Night Moves, written by Seeger. And I think, Seeger just, I don't know, for whatever reason, didn't feel he wanted to use it. Offered it to Sammy, and then Sammy was saying, a little too soft for me right now. I want to go, the hard rockers. He said, it's a great song, but, I'm not going to do it. So Seeger took it back.
Now I'm imagining like the alternate world where Sammy Hagar sang Night Moves.
Right? Isn't it weird?
Like, no, it actually sounds awesome in my
would it be,
at least
it would
in
be
my
cool,
brain.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's no disrespect to Bob Seger, because obviously it became Night Moves. That's
right.
Arguably one of his, biggest hits, I think. It's one of my favorites of Bob's. Let's put it that way.
And he's got many. He's got
he has so many that you don't even realize it's him sometimes. It's like, oh, that's Bob Seger. Like, well, son of a bitch. But now I'm trying to wrap my brain around Sammy Hagar singing it.
Crazy.
And it sounds great, but yeah, it's crazy. And can you
like
just
how
imagine?
those two worlds even
it wouldn't
how
have
did those two guys
it would not have hurt Bob's career in the slightest if he had not sung that song. It wouldn't have hurt.
Right.
Absolutely not.
It'd have been absolutely fine. But now I'm just thinking, like, what would that have done for Sammy at that point?
Yep.
Well, and Sammy, didn't he write a couple of songs for Bette Midler?
Yes. Yeah, he wrote
I knew that.
The one that was in her movie, which I can't recall the name of it, but and then the Rick Springfield song. He
Wing
wrote.
Beneath My
Right.
Wings? Did he
No,
wrote that?
No,
no,
not that
no.
one.
I didn't think
This should have
so.
been early.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep on Rockin'? No, that can't be it. No, it was called something else. No, maybe that's it. It's from the
Bill recorded
soundtrack
2
of the
Hagar
19
songs. Keep on
That
rocking.
sounds like one he'd write.
What's the other song? Keep Her on Rockin' and what?
in red.
Okay. Well, by the way, there's a great photo in Sammy's book of Sammy's dad holding Sammy. This is 1948. Sammy was just a year old, and he's on a golf course in Palm Springs with Bob Hope, and Bob Hope's looking at little Sammy.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Yeah. There, you see it?
Oh yeah, there it is. You're talking about his evolution as a musician. Like once he got into like Danger Zone and VOA, that's really been Sammy
Yeah.
kind of came into his own as a songwriter, right?
Right.
And
Standing Hampton, 3-Lock Box, VOA. Boom, boom, boom. All three, I think, are solid from start to finish. He brought in a producer for Standing Hampton that Sammy even admitted that this guy really whipped him into shape and said, every song on this album, you're going to put everything into it.
Mhm.
Whereas in other Sammy would be like, we got enough songs, let's get out on the road. Like he just wanted to hit the road and tour. And this time, let's see, where is it? Standing Hampton, Keith Olsen was the producer. And he's the one who said to Sammy, every song on this album is going to be killer. Yeah, definitely recommend those albums. Corey, there were some books that you've read that you're a big fan of, including 2 books by Stephen Davis, one from 2003 called Walk This Way, the autobiography of Aerosmith. The other is from 2008, Watch You Bleed, the saga of Guns N' Roses. I definitely need to read those. One you recommended is the 2007 book, Genesis Chapter and Verse. I'm a huge Genesis fan. I don't know how I missed this one, but this is what all the members of the band, past and present.
Yeah.
Telling
Yeah,
the band story.
they all contribute to it. It's a massive book. You don't want to like take it on a plane. It's huge. It's kind of like U2 by U2. If you remember when that one came out, a
Yeah.
massive
Oh, yeah.
book. That's what Chapter and Verse was. But and like I got into Genesis because the Phil Collins stuff. I'm a child of the '80s, so Invisible Touch was a big album for me and all that. But to go back and get the scoop on the Peter Gabriel stuff and it's really an interesting band biography. Even little tidbits like Genesis invented the Very Light, which would become a concert staple for decades, right? It was Genesis that actually put in their R&D into that and got those lights out there. So really cool book. They don't talk too much about when Phil left, but if you're into like the Gabriel stuff and the Collins stuff, I would highly recommend it.
Mark, any books that stand out for you that you've read, you recommend?
I would recommend basically any of Corey Taylor's books. Corey Taylor is the vocalist of bands like Slipknot and Stone Sour, and he's got his own little solo album stuff out right now. I'd recommend those. If nothing else, you may not get the full story. I mean, you won't get everybody's story of the band Slipknot or Stone Sour in those books, but he has very unique perspectives on what touring life is. With each book, he publishes the evolution of what music was when he was growing up, where it was as the band was getting started at all of his bands, and then where it has ended up through the course of the years. And we talked about social media. He's got a whole book basically based on that that gives you some unique perspectives. So it's a little more on the kind of newer modern day, but I've read, I think, all of his publications, and those have just been like really insightful.
How many has he released? How many books?
He's got I've read, I think, 3. So he's got like 3 now.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. And he's a huge Van Halen guy too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's just a huge like rock and roll guy just in general. I mean, and he does in these books, he'll talk about the bands that he loves. He's such a huge fan of the 80s era because he grew up on it. And so yeah, it's not uncommon for him to just sort of name drop all this, talk about his time in the LA music scene, just kind of observing it after listening to it for so long and everything like that. But yeah, insightful stuff as far as rock goes. I want to check out that Genesis book, if nothing else, just for the Peter Gabriel stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mark, he's got 5 books that I see here.
He's got 5. Oh,
7 Deadly Sins. You're making me hate you.
Yes.
A funny thing happened on the way to heaven.
That's his storybook.
Oh,
like
cool.
his time on the
I gotta
road
read that.
experiencing like supernatural things.
Oh yeah, I'm in for
Cool.
that one. American
Yeah,
51, a probe into the realities.
That's the
House
social
of-
media one.
Okay, House of Golden Bones. You gonna add something else on that? A funny thing happened on the way to heaven.
Including stories of when he was with Slipknot, they recorded their third album with Rick Rubin in Rick Rubin's famously haunted house. And he like has this whole chapter of his time recording that album with the band and the stuff he experienced
Oh, I'm in for that one.
whilst recording. The Golden Bone, the House of Golden Bone, that's actually that's a comic book that is sort of a companion book with the Stone Sour album, House of Golden Bone. So that's just kind of, that's a fiction. That's one of his fictions, but yeah.
Cool.
So he's got four books that are autobiographical, and they're just interesting reads. And he's a guy that always has a lot to say, and he's very opinionated, but he's also a no bullshitter. So you're gonna get the what's what with him, and I don't know. I appreciate that.
Yep.
You know, he
Great
actually
voice, man. He's got a great singing voice.
Unreal.
Yeah.
But he actually wrote the foreword to one of my favorite books about music in the 80s called Nothing But a Good Time, which I just read this past year about heavy metal in the 80s on the Sunset Strip.
Of course,
One of the
he
books
did.
you recommend, Corey. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, those are, I've got to add those then to my list of must read books that I haven't yet. Some of the other books, Corey, you mentioned that you haven't read yet. Fortunate Son by John Fogerty, which I think you say you have. It's on the shelf. You haven't read it yet.
It's on the shelf. Yeah, just haven't read it yet.
Another Stephen Davis book called Hammer of the Gods, The Led Zeppelin Saga, Me by Elton John, The Lives of Brian by Brian Johnson, which just came out. I've got to read that one.
Ooh, I want to read that one.
Yeah, Definitely by Def Leppard. That's coming out May 2023. Can't wait for that. Not Dead Yet by Phil Collins. Eruption by Brad Talinsky and Chris Gill. Highly recommend that one, along with Unchained by Paul Brannigan. Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music. Greg Renoff. You got to read those. But one more on Corey's must-read list. And Mark, see if you've read this one. Bond, The Last Highway by Jesse Fink.
No, but I know about it. But I do know about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I had Jesse on the podcast. He was promoting the updated edition. What a fascinating read. He says Bon Scott didn't die of acute alcohol poisoning in February of 1980. And Jesse did a ton of work to find out what really happened that night. And he said it was an accidental overdose, that Bon was doing heroin. Somebody freaked out, didn't want to get caught with Bon dead in his apartment. So he moves Bon to that car where he's found. And you don't want to put the book down. It's so good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, that's crazy. And that he definitely says the lyrics to Back in Black, most if not all the songs, they came from Bon's notes and things.
Which the band vehemently denies, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
But you know what Jesse said? That the family of Bon Scott secretly, kind of not on the record, gets publishing from Back in Black.
Really?
Royalties.
Oh.
Yep. So that's a great one. You got to read that one. Some definitive biographies yet to be written. Corey says wants to be written. On ZZ Top, The Cars, Journey, Loverboy. Got to get a Canadian band in there. Corey's from Canada. Skid Row and Spinal Tap. Mark, what about you? Any books you want to see written that haven't been yet? On a band, artist, anything that has to do with rock and roll.
I don't know that there is an official Deftones book. I would very much like to read about that.
Yep.
I would love to read a book on. I'm sure there are Depeche Mode books, but I would like to read like one of theirs as well. And then I want to read about a different perspective. I know Neil before he passed, Neil Peart, he wrote a book. Does Geddy himself have a book?
He does, but it's he calls it the Big Book of Big Book on Bass, or Big Book of Bass.
I would like to have him publish something in the vein of just his writing approach, just where kind of the ideas might be stemmed from, or where maybe like a retrospective commentary on, say, like 2112 or something like that. I just get into the mindset of where everyone was, which might, I mean, maybe he can't do that because if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Neil was real heavily involved in the writing of that one.
Yeah, all the
music. He wrote all the lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah.
So well, then there you go. But I think it would be really cool to say what you will about the band now, but early Tool I was a big fan of, and I don't know that there's been like a definitive book that really goes into what Maynard and Danny and all those guys were feeling in terms of approaching each album, because each album is just vastly different from the last. I would like to read that. Maynard has a book out, but it's not really, it doesn't really pertain to his time in Tool so much as it is just other things. So I would like to I think that would be really interesting to read, even though I've kind of fallen out of favor with Tool in their last few releases, but just to read the an introspective of their process would be very, very interesting.
Cool. That's it, guys. I think we covered it all, man. This is this was fun. Let's plug the show website, podcastwillrock.com. You guys go ahead, do your thing.
Podcastwillrock.com is the website. We're at Podcast Will Rock on Twitter, Facebook now, Instagram, and YouTube, where we're going to be slicing up the marathon 5.5 hour live show we did a few days ago, making it a little easier for people to consume. And of course, we'll be dropping the podcast from those shows as well. A couple of big tracks we spun on that one. A favorite cover of Mark Camire, as we're the only two that voted for it, and a big hit off of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And if you want to yell at me for whatever reason, you can find me at Backtracks Aerosmith Revisited, Backtracks Theme Music, and at CD Morrissette on Twitter.
I echo everything Corey said. You can find me personally at Mark the Bat on Twitter and Instagram. And also find Corey and drop him a line and just tell him that you appreciate what he does, because he keeps the train moving. Okay. Like we have all this wonderful content and all this stuff because of Corey's efforts. All right. Like, he's producer extraordinaire as well as podcaster. So at least just tweet at CD Morrissette and say, hey man, you're doing great. Thank you.
I'm so tired.
Yes,
you have the photo on Facebook has you with multiple headphones on, and just
that's my life.
Says it all. All right, guys, this was great, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, dude.
Big fans of the show, so I'm so happy you invited us on.
Well, that was an adventure.
That was quite a show you put on today.
Well, let me just close this conversation by saying you are one unique individual.